We're convening the June meeting, the general meeting of Norfolk Property Owners Association at 7:10. And I'd like to summarize some things that have happened during my tenure as president and bring us up to date on a few things. First of all, I want to thank all the people who helped us with the sign and the date, and that is a work in progress, so let me explain that. It was mid-September, and I was abroad and got a phone call from John McCall that our sign had been in a very severe accident. And a number of people stepped forward to volunteer to help put it back to rights. We applied for insurance. The insurance company had us cost out everything and did a lot of contract estimates to build up what it would take. There's electrical, there's the carpentry, there's the figures on the sign, and there's landscaping. And the insurance adjuster said that they didn't know what a sign like that would cost, so they accepted our contractor's estimates, and eventually we got the money, and we are marshaling it very carefully. We're doing whatever we can by volunteer work, and as a result, and we're paying contractors where we must. But as a result, we actually managed to replace the Code Point, the Leasing's Code sign, out of some of that insurance money. But in case you're wondering why it's taken us so long, it was stretched our funds as far as possible. And many, many people contributed to help this out. We had almost dueling carpenters. We had people from various sectors who said they could help out. And among other people who actually finally did something, Larry Rich, my husband Paul, Rispin, and Barry contributed quite a bit. And my husband can tell you now about poison ivy because that was part of his contribution in clearing away some of the mess. So you can imagine we're going to have a professional contractor go in and do the, if you don't mind, I'd like to finish my remarks.
Do we have a quorum? No.
I'd like to finish my remarks and we'll get there. Thank you. But of course you can count while I'm finishing my remarks, John. In any event, so this will be finished in the fall when the contractor, the landscaping contractor can go in and finish it up after absolutely everything is finished. In general, I also want to say during this year, people have stepped forward from the community as volunteers to help out in many, many ways. Grass cutting, bush hogging in certain sensitive areas. I'm also amazed at how this board itself volunteers for a lot of things. Secondly, the roads, and I'm particularly pleased about that. We have had a 4-year schedule for rejuvenation of our roads. That was built into the SPD. We've done the first 2 years and due for the 3rd year this summer. And we went to Total Asphalt, who are the purveyors of the right kind of formulation to function well for rejuvenation, which prolongs the life of the roads. And they said if we would do all the rest of the roads this summer instead of cutting that in half, some this summer and some the next summer, they gave us basically a 40% discount on the 2nd year's work. So we've got 2 years, and we have 2 to go, and we have a 40% discount on the second year. So starting next week, all the rest of the roads will be rejuvenated, and rejuvenation prolongs the life of the roads, keeps them looking good, and will be done with the whole cycle in 3 years. In addition, Gary Peel was instrumental in bringing on board a professional road engineer several years ago, and by now we've had 18 or so years with our new roads, and several with Jeff McDonald. And it's now manifest, it's quite clear that we do not have to build up money in reserve for massive repaving of the roads. They will not decrepitate in a few years. What we're doing is maintaining them in good order on a pay-as-you-go basis by repaving repairing and repaving between a half and a mile a year. That's the 15 to 20 year cycle. And because the roads are already there that we're reworking, the cost is much lower than it was de novo when we started this whole thing with the original SUV. So it's a pay-as-you-go issue. And later on, you'll hear more about the roads in the Roads Committee report. Now, to respond to John's question, we do not have a quorum. And let me just read what was on the back of the newsletter. All meetings will be conducted according to Maryland Code, Corporations and Associations, Title 5, Subtitle 2, Section 5-206.J, which states, if the number of members present at a meeting does not meet the requirements of the quorum, those present may call another meeting to meet quorum requirements. At the additional meeting, the members present in person will constitute a quorum. Now, people are dispersing for the summer holidays, and the next meeting that we recommend will be the September general meeting. All business there will be treated as a quorum business if we vote tonight in favor of that. So, Rhea, does everyone have a ballot?
I'm not sure that Mr. and Mrs. Smith came in a few minutes ago.
Well, if everyone has a ballot, we might as well do that. Would you rather have a show of hands?
Yeah.
Okay. All in favor
What's the question again? All in favor of getting the meeting?
of treating the next general meeting as a quorum for business advertised for this meeting? All opposed? And it passes.
Could I make an observation about that?
Yes.
Your reading of that statute is not complete. It requires that you publish the agenda for the meeting in a local paper of record prior to the meeting. So whatever business we are going to be taking is not going to be general, it's just going to be specific. That's what we're going to take here.
Absolutely.
That's not correct. That's not correct.
This is.
I'm sorry, you're wrong, and I will just have to agree to disagree. We do have to publish it, but any business that can be conducted at that meeting can be conducted. Period. Doesn't have to be.
It has to be noticed in the notice.
It has to be
In that notice.
in the notice, but it doesn't have to be specific.
You mean it can be vague?
It can be an agenda similar to what you've already had in your hands. And I'm not going to debate it with you because I know where you're going. So it's, I'm sorry you're wrong. So,
I'm not wrong. That's
But
all.
let me just note
you're never wrong, I'm sure.
out of respect for the state laws and the community, we do make every effort to have every item for decision by the community available in your hands at least 15 days in advance. And there are various laws that govern that, but this is a particular point to deal with meetings without quorums. Okay. You all have the minutes. The minutes have been available on the website.
They're on the website, they're on the draft. I don't put them on the website here.
You can't do this.
Sorry,
You can't vote on it.
vote
I can't vote?
No,
Okay,
you can give the committee reports to it.
so what is it? Okay,
Actually, there should be.
all right, now we have to
We
skip
got
the
a
budget.
quorum.
Yeah, let's skip the budget.
You can't vote on it.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right, then let me just address agenda item 4. Budget approval. That is the main item of business for tonight, and that will be taken up at the September meeting. You have it in the newsletter. It's been repeated here for you. And I do want to note that that budget is for that we approved is for the non-STD portion of our budget. The STD portion of our budget is locked in when the commissioners agreed to the STD, and that was several years ago, and that was available at the time to the public. So what we're doing, what we would have done tonight, and the STD portion is also available to you in this handout package. But what we would have done today was look at what the community does get to approve every year in the June meeting, or as close to it as possible, and that is the budget for our DPPOA funds collected from covenants, mandatory assessments, and in addition, how we budget the shore funds, state highway user funds. So, if there's no further comments, since we're not going to have the vote, and it is the 2015 budget we wanted to look at, I'd like to go to committee reports, and our normal procedure is to start with roads.
Well, since our last general meeting, the only thing we've really done is approved. As Amy mentioned, we got a pretty good deal from our provider of the rejuvenation product. So the board, after checking to make sure we had money to pay for it, approved the completion of that project this year instead of doing the rest of it next year. And that just kicks off on Monday. If you're on one of the roads, and there's a handout, be aware that they'll be spraying your road. Most of the roads, in fact almost all roads, there's only one road I know of and I live on it, that will be done half the time so that you can get, you can drive on the road. The product dries very quickly. In this weather, it'll probably dry within an hour or two at the most. But if you have a driveway that has maybe a concrete or stamped concrete driveway or something that you want to be real careful, make sure you don't drive over the product and then onto your concrete and have black stripes. It's not likely to happen if you stay off of it until they take the cones away, but just be aware, it takes a little bit for it to dry. In this weather, though, it dries very quickly. We are looking towards doing work along the right-of-way, tree trimming and bush hogging to ride. You may have noticed there's a lot of grass and undergrowth along the edges. We've got a problem getting that done, and that is with the county. It requires, just like if you go to cut anything in your yard, you're supposed to have a permit for it. And we we have a permit for that has yet to be renewed, even though we asked for it some time ago. It's been a while. And so we're waiting for them to approve that. It's a simple renewal. I'm not sure what the problem is. So when that gets renewed, we have contractors lined up to bush hog and cut the trees back. This year will be a 3-year cutback, so it'll be a fairly heavy cutback. And once it's done, it'll look great. But I'm sorry to live with it like it is for now. And I think that's all I have for us.
Question?
Yeah.
Will a contractor be available for residential driveways?
I'm sure he would be. He's a local fellow.
Okay.
Yes.
Question, and I don't realize this topic would bring the meeting to, there's just pothole on Copco Drive, is that related, not related? Is that something that as a private resident I could just fill in, or I'm not permitting? So there's just a pothole.
Don't try to fill the pothole in. We're taking stock of the potholes and we'll be addressing potholes.
What you didn't, you focus so much on bush hogging and rejuvenation. Our normal maintenance is going on anyway, so.
We're aware of about 4 or 5 potholes that need to be addressed. Okay.
I interrupted somebody else over
I
there.
don't think so.
Okay, next is Finance Committee.
Okay, we distributed again a balance sheet showing the amount of money that we're dealing with right at this point in time. And on the back side is the profit and loss statement for the year up to date. There's nothing really unusual there. We did have quite a bit of snowfall this winter, and we have spent quite a bit of money on legal services this year. If anyone has any questions about that, I'd be glad to answer them anytime. Maria?
Excuse me, what was the legal services?
There were services with our lawyer on several legal issues in the community. Also, the question of the covenants and the mandatory assessments. We got several legal opinions on that. Maria?
On the profit and loss budget versus actual, I think I'm reading it correctly, if you go under income DPPOA.
I'm the only one having trouble hearing, Marie.
Under DPPOA, it has $104,714. That was income from DPPOA
Yeah, DPPOA mandatory dues, fees, assessments.
for the 1314, but then if you go to your large sheet of paper that you provided with a lot of different things, it says 50,000.
Which other one?
This one is stapled. So the actual is 50,000 per income. So I'm not understanding how there's a over $50,000 difference there.
Well,
It's good to
answer
total.
that question.
Yeah, so you're total income.
Say what?
Go on the combined, the total income? It includes the carryover, I'm saying?
The carryovers and the certificates of deposit should be there. Yeah. Well, it's totaled all there. Just go down the column, you get the 104.
So it's including all the carryovers. So it's not really necessarily that the dues that were collected that year. It's just everything.
It includes all income received by DPPOA. That's what total income is. John?
Yes, Max. At the earlier meeting, I asked about the legal opinion on the mandatory assessment. I've been a member of this organization for well over 20 years. That issue of mandatory assessments has not been addressed directly in that fashion, but we have tried in the past to get money in addition to the $10 road fee as a mandatory funding to the organization. I've asked for the legal opinion on that. Where the reference is, I have searched, I find no law change I find no legal opinion that relates to that, except perhaps what you may have here. I've called his office 3 occasions. He refused to take my calls. He referred me to our office down here, who I since sent a letter to saying I'm not going to pay them until I get some sort of rational explanation as to the legal basis for it. Can you provide that for me?
I'm going to ask Gary Keel to respond to your intervention, John, because he is the one who chairs the planning committee, which took into account all of our responsibilities that we must meet, and that's why we have a mandatory assessment. It's a covenant-born fee. The $10 fee you're thinking of is a road fee under the covenant, but this is for the rest of our responsibilities.
I'd like to see the reference on that. I read the covenants, and there are about 5 different iterations of the covenants. Some have, if you go down to the state office, the county offices here and read the covenants, you'll find a variety of different ones. The ones I have do not provide for any kind of such assessment, so I'd be interested in seeing that.
My turn?
The
Yeah.
covenants are not all the same.
Okay. If you were here at the last general meeting, or was it the one before?
Last one.
I went through this in detail and explained it, and I will give you a synopsis of that again.
I don't want a synopsis of it, I want it in hard copy.
We're not able to provide that.
Say again?
We are not able to provide that.
Well, I will not tell you until I get a reference to it.
Well, that's certainly your option.
Let me finish on it.
Put a lien
I
on
will not pay it until I get something that rationalizes this in a hard fashion.
And frankly, in the description that I gave, which gave you the rationale. So I don't know what else we can
I
give
want
you.
to see it.
We're not
I want to
going
see
to
a
give
legal
you
reference to it. I want to see it.
We're not going to give our attorney. It's not that.
I don't think you have the authority to do that.
Well, I think we do understand law.
No, you don't. Not that I can find.
Well, I guess we're going to have to agree and disagree on that again.
Did you get elected to the state legislature?
No, but I know how to read the law. And I know how to listen to
I
an attorney.
handle language very well.
So,
Okay.
Okay, you also have a actual budget versus last year printout here. It shows all the combined expenses in a horizontal fashion. It's pretty detailed. If you have time to go through it sometime, I can explain things.
What is road, what is road stand?
Right away.
What does it mean, right?
Right away. Also, in your package here, was assumed everybody has a copy of the current STD4 budget, and all line items are included in that. That is fixed for 5 years. It doesn't change. We have 3 years left to go in that, so we're stuck with that money because that's what the BOCC decided that we should live with. So that's on there. Also, I provided a copy of the corrected budget display and the treasury report for the year to the membership here. So that was out on the table out there too. Any other questions?
Okay, I'm ready.
Maria?
I'm sorry, I heard in one of your meetings that you're now using some of the road fees for other expenses, covenant fees.
We have used this year some of the road fees for some non-right-of-way expenses, yes.
So what's
And they're listed here.
So are you limited in terms of how much of that road fees can be spent elsewhere?
No, well, we're not continuing that. That got passed accidentally, but you see in the new budget, there is no non-right-of-way expenditures from covenant fees or from shore, or from the STD.
Okay, because I thought I saw, like,
fee,
Correct.
estimated, yeah.
And so where is that being used on the road? Because whereas, like here, you sort of said covenant projects, covenant capital. Sorry, Max, I said that. So where is all that money being dispersed in your budget in this?
Well, if you look at the combined report under there, you'll see we spent some $1,300.
This one, I'm looking at, for the proposed budget that you have.
If you're looking at the proposed budget,
Yes. So I'm looking at this one or the one with multiple lines?
yeah, where did that go? Yeah. No, there. The covenant line, let me check my spreadsheet here. Currently, there are no expenses from covenants for the proposed budget. Or non-road expenses. There are none. So there's no line, there's a zero. Just
So
nothing
the
there.
money is not being used, I'm sorry, I'm not understanding. I guess, I mean, you're indicating some places where they're sure and stuff like that, but total covenant expenses is $4,351.
Well, there should be a line item there for covenant expenses for right-of-way expenses, and it should total $4,350 for 2015.
And so what happens to the remainder?
What happens to the remainder, it just gets carried over from year to year.
So you're going to carry it over, it's not going to be part of the additional fees for other things?
I don't quite understand the question. It's money carried over, we'll put into
I
the
just
budget.
wanted to understand, because as I said, at one of the meetings, I heard that you were spending money, road fees in other ways besides on the roads.
We looked at doing that and decided not to do that.
So that's not happening, okay, thank you.
John?
Yeah, I've got two questions basically. One is I'm looking at the profit and loss statement. This document right here.
Okay.
It has property acquisitions on there. It looks like there was some activity on that. Could you explain that?
Max, over the property.
The only thing on the property acquisitions at this time is the taxes that we pay on the properties that we own.
Okay.
What document are you looking at? What document are you looking at?
The property loss.
Illinois Property Owners Association profit and loss.
Oh, okay.
The property acquisition on it, it has some activity. It shows the over budget. So I'm curious about what that was.
Under budget.
Say again?
It's under budget.
It was under budget.
The 1844 expense there, which is for the property taxes, so.
Those are property taxes.
For the, all the lots we own in the building.
Yes. Okay. That's it.
Same as everybody else pays.
Second question I have, this is more general. I see here again, staff and professional services. What are we paying for the office staff here? Lump sum.
Lump sum, we want this,
It's already in.
well, that's,
Staff and professional services.
say again? That's for all the services we pay.
Except for the attorney.
The 37, that's it.
Well, there's $37,289 there from STD, and what does it have? $34,555 from DPPOA. So roughly $71,000.
71,000.
That includes the manager's net salary, all of the expenses for FICA, Social Security, Workman's compensation for, a dozen people maybe, under our contract. And that also includes all the labor that we pay for the volunteers who clean the streets.
Casual.
But the legal fees are in there too. The legal fees, the accountant and so on. I don't make $73,000.
Yeah, no,
Just so that we're clear on that.
I wonder, we're now getting into some very detailed questions. You have all material. Perhaps Max would be willing to make himself available at a specified time, or you can approach him individually. But I would like to go on with the rest of
I
the
think
meeting.
this is something.
And I just want to
this-
note that we're getting into an enormous amount of detail relative to the agenda item itself, which is really the non-SDG income and expenses for 2015.
And raised this question as a matter of personal privilege because it was an article in the Recorder about the lack of specificity. One of the issues raised in that article was the salaries being paid, and that's why I'm asking this question.
Excuse me.
Yeah, go ahead.
That information has been, and always will be available at the office for any detailed inspection you want to make.
I guess I'm asking it for a public meeting and not for private consumption.
It's in the combined report.
It's in the combined report line by line.
John, if you read my treasury report, there you'll see a whole lot of information about what changed in the budget, what we're proposing to do, and what some of the difficulties were. One of the problems we have.
Out of the request to move ahead.
One of the problems we do have is that the Board of County Commissioners, they fixed our proposed budget, STE budget, for 5 years. And that fixed their contribution to the office facilities, administration, everything, to a fixed number 2 years ago, which is good for another 3 years. So consequently, any increases in the amount of money we have to spend is all coming out of DPPOA funds instead.
I guess when I've been here 20 years now, and I remember when this was done as volunteer work. It was done down here, and they had a file cabinet back in the corner, and that was the substance of our operation. Now we have a clubhouse.
Can I make a comment? I moved here about 20 or 30 years ago, I can't remember, about 82. And our road was so bad that I was embarrassed. I used to bring friends in on a circuitous route so that we wouldn't think we were living in a dump. And if you would like to volunteer to do some of the office work, I'm sure people would be really happy if you came in to help do the volunteer work. Every time something goes out to the public, it takes 4, 5, 6 people volunteering for 2 or 3 days to get it out. But you don't come and help, John.
I'm getting a little bit old, 80 years old.
So are we.
Yeah,
So am I. But that's why we have somebody doing it, helping us with it.
John, pay your $10 road fees, one, that's just you.
All right, I'm ready to move on, and I am delegating the environmental committee report to Kurt Larson because the most significant activity there has been something that he's been very closely connected with, and it gives you a chance to hear from someone else on the board.
Thank you. Okay, just to be very brief, one of the issues that we're working with as far as the environmental committee is, as some of you know, that there's at the head of the Leeson Cove Canal, that is right where it comes up to Rossby Hall Road. There's been a lot of erosion and sedimentation and a lot of deposition of sediment, really shallowing that end of Leeson's Cove. And we've been concerned for some time because on the one hand, we're trying to find ways of controlling the sedimentation, but we've also come to the conclusion that a large portion of contributor to this has been really part of the engineering from the State Highway Department, along with the culverts on Rossby Hall Road. So through the auspices of the Patuxent Riverkeeper, Fred Tubman, we've been able to contact higher echelons within the highway department to try to have real people come and look at the problem and go along with the idea and really agree that something has to be done as far as the highway department having to make changes in the culverts to try to reduce both the stream velocity coming out as well as the sediment that is being contributed to lease and scope. So on the one hand, we expect to have more contact and help from the state highway authority administration, and it's really been through work with Fred Tubman, the Patuxent Riverkeeper, who's made this stuff available to us. The other thing that we're working with, or we've been working in cooperation with the Southern Capital Land Trust to try to check the flow of sediment into Gleason's Cove, and the SCLT is in the process of constructing biolog check dams in the stream drainage entering one of the tributaries going to Gleason's Cove to try to retain sediment as well as nutrients carried by the sediment that are going into the bay. And that we've selected some sites and we'll be putting those biolog check dams in the next couple of weeks, I think. Probably the biggest issue here is that we've specifically been partnering now with the Highway Department, with the Patuxent Riverkeepers and the Southern Capital Land Trust to do all of this work, so there will be no expense as far as the community is concerned. And I think that's the biggest point.
Thanks, and let me just note that from time to time I hear critiques that the environmental committee should not be paying attention to a public waterway. Well, the board has received repeated complaints and comments from several householders on Gleason's Cove. And in addition, we know that you cannot grow oysters in Gleason's Cove because of the repeated onslaught of sediment. So I'm thrilled that after several years of trying, we finally pushed the right buttons, and slowly we're on our way to improving the situation. So thank you very much, Kurt, and thank you for your efforts bringing in SCLT. And then finally, I'd like to call on Peter Holt, because we have a new safety committee to replace our community emergency response team. And we also have some new security measures at the beach. And Peter Huncho, the whole thing.
Thank you, Amy. I'll make this really brief, but it is important because we all get involved in the safety and emergency kind of responses that we require as a private community and engendering the support of the 9/11 resources that we have available to us. We used to have a search committee here about 2 years ago that lasted for about 5 years, but for reliability and insurance reasons, we had to drop that. And now, as Amy said, we have a safety committee under the direct supervision and control of our board of directors. It's a standing or permanent committee that will report to you regularly any incidents that come up. But for liability reasons, it has to be under the control and direction directly of the board. Now, under that, and the board voted to accept the safety committee on May 14th, and it will be part of our association. We have 10 members right now. Some of them are here: Max, Gary, Amy, and Rhea are all members. There are some others who are radio ham operators. Ralph's a member. So it's a active part of our community that are part of this committee. And we hope we can be responsive to you, both in terms of tree damage or house damage or road problems. And one that we've been focusing on this past winter, and Joe and Joe are very well aware of that over there, that this has been the beach issues. The beach issues have been with us for as long as I can remember, 15, 20 years. And I did a report which I submitted to Fran as president of the club, and also to our association board. And what is very obvious, since there is no longer a real fence between our two properties, and the club property can only be reached really from the association side, that we have to join forces together and try to work the monitoring of the properties and the beaches. They're two separate issues. The property being private property, the beaches being state property, but access controlled through private property. So it gets a little complex. But what we've done this spring, after studying it, is we have mounted now video cameras on the Drum Point Property Owners Association. Access to the beach is next to the DPPOA. And those cameras are cameras that you use for hunting. They take 2,000 pictures before they start recycling their memories. Each picture is triggered by movement, day or night. And this will allow us to pick up confrontations, trespassing, license plates, incidents. We hope it will, by having signs there announcing that this is under video surveillance, we hope it will mitigate some of the damages which might take place. Now, we've had in the last, since Memorial Day, we've had numerous incidents already. It comes up with school being out, or kids having vacation, or the warmer weather. I can go into some of them, but some of them are rather distasteful, but when you're 18 and 20 and you want to have sex on the beach, I guess you're going to do it. And so we will now get pornographic pictures. But I was drinking, I walked down there, put up some of these cameras, and lo and behold, I'm standing there putting up these cameras, and a John Deere tractor comes pouring out of the woods from the club side, and into behind is a trailer with two girls in bikinis in it. And first of all, motorized vehicles are not allowed on beaches, but this guy's got a real act in going with whatever he was doing. I walked through the woods. There were 21 cans of empty beer lying in the woods, among other things. And there's really a boulevard that runs from the DPOA beach. Apparently vehicles now can even drive through all the way to the club. So we're integrally integrated in trying to resolve this together. And we're going it step by step. I've said many times we can't make this Fort Knox. There's just no way to do that. Once somebody's on the beach, it's no longer the club's responsibility, and it's no longer the DPOA's responsibility. They're on the beach, and they can be there, up to high water mark. And John, I think that's correct, is that right? Okay, you agree? Thanks, John. We will work because the sheriff now, we talked to the sheriff, we had an incident the other day, and he said, well, I can't do any arrests, I can't issue any citations because it isn't listed as a private property, no trespassing. Well, we've shown them all the signs and the gates we have, and I think there was a little misunderstanding on that, and we have assurances now from the sheriff's office that the sheriff and deputies will come down, do regular patrols. They will have access to the beach through the combination lock. They will make patrols night and day. We will have the video cameras to back up any serious confrontations and to dissuade people from taking retribution against anybody who confronts the kids there. How you determine who is trespassing and who is not trespassing is difficult. The tags that we issue are for vehicles, they're not for individuals. For individuals, we can only ask them if they have a key, which I did to these kids coming out on a John Deere, and they said their uncle who lives on Ottawa Drive has a key to the club. They were coming from the club. So I mean, these are these little nuances that we get into. We want people to enjoy the beaches, so we have to draw a compromise between gross misbehavior, which Joe has seen and others have seen down there, the trashing of our picnic tables, the destruction of our trash cans. We have an outhouse down there, or what do you call one of these cabins that they regularly clean and take care of. So this is a joint effort that we're trying to work on. It will be a continuing effort. We pay something like $5,000 a year for volunteers, is that correct? Which we're trying. Jerry Clark said that we shouldn't have to pay that the police patrols should be able to take care of that for us. So we'd like to be able to save that money if we can. But that's to pay, quote unquote, the volunteers who have been going down there and trying to keep an eye on the place on the weekends. They've been doing this for years. And that group of people have really asked us to step in and relieve the burden in patrolling. Now there's a real safety issue here because of the danger of fires. Many houses abut the beaches. If the kids go down there at 2 o'clock in the morning or 4 o'clock in the morning, have bonfires and have beer parties, and the wind comes up from the south, which has happened. We've had forest fires in there. It can affect very serious property damage. And we saw what happened at Solomon's when the lighthouse burned down, and just that was one cigarette dropped between a boardwalk, and it took out millions of dollars in damage, and can be very serious. So this is an issue that I hope you'll all take an interest in. We have a joint committee of Ralph and Fran and others who will be with Amy, and we're working together with the club because actually the club clients come primarily from the DPPOA. In other words, we all live in Drum Point. These are two assets, the association and the club, and we try to work together to solve this problem. I think I've gone on long enough. Is there anything I missed? Does anybody have any questions? John?
I always have a question.
Good, go for it.
You mentioned that there was insurance liabilities. You were concerned, the reason that you abandoned the previous organization.
That's correct.
Was because of insurance costs for liability. What liabilities were you trying to insure against, and is the club going to pay for those liabilities now?
The club is not.
What other liabilities were you concerned about?
The liabilities depend on...
the club.
No. The responsibility when you engage in volunteer emergency response falls under two categories. One is who initiates and directs the action that you are taking, whether it is the county, whether it's yourself, or whether it's an association. And before, neither the county nor the Drum Point Property Owners Association nor the club had the ability to provide liability insurance for volunteers under what I was running, which was the CERT program. Neither the county, nor the association, nor the club could provide any kind of liability should anything happen to any of the volunteers, or they would be sued for something they did.
Is the association now paying for that liability?
Now, what we had to do was to make the association, this safety committee, we had to limit what we can do, vastly limit, to really passive reporting, which is much more limited than we were trained for in the CERT program. in the CERT program, you will recall, we were to do light search and rescue, triage, first aid, really get involved as individuals.
Peter,
But
I'm
now,
sorry to interrupt, but I think your question is, what's the coverage? It's under our umbrella policy of the organization.
That's my
That's
question.
your insurance
And
claim.
he's not, and his activity is
His
not covered.
activity, when CERT
It is
disbanded,
now.
we brought them under our programs, therefore they're covered under the corporation's umbrella policy.
Fine. Now, is that umbrella policy going to increase in cost because of the activities?
It has not.
That was my question.
Thank you.
Thank you.
can I add one more thing? As an individual, you can come under the Good Samaritan law. And the Good Samaritan allows you, if you're familiar with the Good Samaritan laws. So I just wanted to be clear that there were various sources of volunteer liability coverage. Thank you.
I'd just like to make a note about this and several other things about which questions have been raised. We're happy to summarize the answers here, but I do want to note that through the magic of modern technology, we are video recording all of our board meetings, and those board meetings are available on the website, and this is something we discussed at length. It's also in all of the minutes, so you could access the minutes for any topic you care about, and then go and watch the video for that date if you want the details. Now, we're done with basically all that we can do. We cannot perform any new business, and I believe our old business is resolved. And I am anxious to adjourn the meeting, as is my colleague. But I'm wondering if there's anyone besides John or Maria who has a burning question or comment before I accept a motion to adjourn. If not, yes.
I don't know if this is your final time as the president or not, but if,
I hope it is.
but I think that it is Dennis's final time on the board. And I think you've been on the board for about 6 years, haven't you? And thank you very, very much.
We celebrated that at World Cup of Mixed the other
Yes, we
night.
did, very nice.
Thank you, Dennis.
Okay.
Dan Schreiber was elected in his position.
I have a quick question, and I can put this in writing if you'd like and get a written response, which is really what I prefer. I'd just like to know, why is it that the figures don't foot to each other between the P&L and the combined review relative to their budget numbers, the budget? Why don't they?
That's something I'm going to ask you to speak to Max about.
Sure. Okay.
I'd like to entertain your.
Move to adjourn.
And second?
Start with a motion because.
Well, I tried to work this out.
No, really.